Hey friends, today we're going to be continuing our Bible study of the Gospel of John, and in this episode we're going to be looking at Jesus' discussion with Pilate before his crucifixion. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. Friends, if this is your first time here, I just want to personally welcome you to the HomeGrown Ministries YouTube channel. I'm DJ, and on this channel I strive to provide you with biblical wisdom and encouragement to strengthen your walk of faith. Now listen, I don't have a consistent schedule for posting videos to YouTube, so if you like what you see here today and you don't want to miss anything in the future, please hit that subscribe button down below so that way YouTube will let you know the next time I post a video, because I don't know what that's going to be. That could be 2 days from now, or that could be a month from now. I don't really know. And then to my current subscribers, thank you so much for your support. Every subscription actually gets these videos out to more and more people proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ. So thank you so much for that. I truly appreciate it. Now, before we begin reading out of the Bible today, I do want to provide you some context in case you didn't watch any of the other Bible study videos of the Gospel of John. So what's happening right now is Jesus has been tried by the high priest, and the Jews are actually taking him to Pilate to be tried so that way he can be crucified. Now, we're going to read this passage from the Gospel of John. It comes from John chapter 18, verses 28 through 40. I am going to read from my NIV version, and I will put the words on the screen for you so you can read along with me. If you'd prefer to read from another version, that's fine. Just skip about a minute and a half ahead and we'll catch you on the discussion side. For those of you who are reading with me, let's dive into the Gospel of John starting now. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, they did not enter the palace, because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves, and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then," Pilate said. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of the truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. With that, he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him, but it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. Alright, so like I do every time, I want to break down these passages. There's some really good stuff here that I'll make sure you don't miss. So the very first thing I like to point out is that these Jewish people, they were bringing Jesus in front of Pilate, but they're refusing to go into Pilate's house. And the reason for that is because they didn't want to defile themselves. See, they're religious people. They believe they're righteous. And if they would have went into a Gentile's house, or a person who's not Jewish, they wouldn't have been able to eat the Passover feast. So see, Passover has already happened, but there's a big meal that happens after Passover, and the Jews wanted to be able to eat that meal, and so they didn't want to defile themselves, because if they had done so, they wouldn't have been able to eat the meal. So these people who believe that they're righteous, who are holding up all these laws to make themselves righteous, they have no qualms with killing an innocent man. They have no qualms with murder. And it's so funny to me because this still happens today. So if someone is coming to you claiming to be righteous or claiming to be a good person, watch out, because there's probably something that they're hiding. God says there is no one good, not one, and all of your righteousness, all of your righteous works is like a filthy rag to God. See, God is what makes us righteous. God is who makes us righteous. He redeems us. It's not about what we've done, but it's about what God has done for us. And as we continue through our Bible study of the Gospel of John, we're going to see this very clearly as we come to the end here, and I'm so excited to get there. The other cool thing thing that's happening here is the Jews at the time don't have the ability to administer capital punishment because they weren't rulers of themselves. They were a province of Rome. So in order to convict Jesus with capital punishment, they had to go to Rome. Now, why that's so important is because the Jews' version of capital punishment was through stoning. So Jesus would have died through stoning. However, Jesus had predicted that he'd be lifted up as Moses lifted up the servant. That's back in John chapter 3, verse 14. We did look at that Bible verse in one of our past Bible studies, so if you're interested in learning more about that particular passage, please watch that. I'll put a link here if I remember, but it'll also be in the description below. But so, Jesus predicts that he's going to die via crucifixion. And because the Jews can't actually convict with capital punishment, the Jews, by bringing Jesus to Pilate, are fulfilling Jesus' own prophecy. And I think that's really, really cool that although they're doing this bad thing, they're still playing into God's master plan. So once Jesus is brought before Pilate, Pilate asks him, gets right to the very basics and says, hey, you're being convicted of claiming to be a king, which would make you a threat to Caesar. Are you a king? And Jesus is so good at responding. And when you watch his responses, when you look at his responses, he usually responds with a question to make you think. Sometimes when someone asks you a question and you provide an answer, you'll notice that they really didn't care what your answer was. But if you respond with a question, it'll make that person think. And so this is how Jesus responds most of the time. So Jesus' response here is, have you heard of me? And the idea here being that if he really was a threat, Pilate would have heard of him. So by Jesus asking this question, he's actually proving his innocence, because Pilate responds to Jesus by saying, am I a Jew? Why would I have heard of you? And so obviously Jesus is proving right there that he's innocent, because if he really was a threat, if he really was proclaiming to be a king that was a threat to Caesar, Pilate would have known about it, because Pilate would have had to acted on it to suppress that rebellion. So then it goes one step further. Jesus reinforces this by saying, if my kingdom were of this world, my servants would be fighting to the death to save my life. But my kingdom's not of this world, and my servants are in hiding, because my kingdom isn't about the things that the earthly kingdoms are about. And so again, Jesus is reinforcing his innocence. And as we read this chapter, we see Pilate realizes that, hey, Jesus really is innocent. So then Jesus continues talking to Pilate and essentially says, those who are on the side of truth, those who know the truth, they're with me. They're on my side and they listen to me. And Pilate gives a very Roman response. See, Rome at this time was into satire. They were big into satirical conversations, satirical plays. If you look at their history, there's a lot of satire happening in Rome at this time. So Pilate gives a very Roman response when he says, what is truth? And it's interesting that as a society, we've gotten back to this same satirical condition, because without God, the only way to continue on is to laugh, right? They say the best medicine is laughter. If you laugh at yourself, if you laugh at your trials, those trials are more tolerable. And without God, we're right back at that. We're saying, what is truth? Can you really know anything? So I'm going to give you a quote from one of Bart Ehrman's recent blogs. If you don't know who he is a New Testament scholar that is not a Christian, and he's been on the side of agnostics. Atheists love to claim that he's an atheist, and he will say that he's not an atheist. But here's where he reinforces this. This is from a recent blog post. I'll put a link to the full article if you want to read it in the description below. But it's very interesting because it's a recent revelation, and it makes me have hope for this guy. So listen to what he says. He says, so here is my duh moment. A rock has no way of recognizing that an animate object such as a dandelion exists. A dandelion has no way of recognizing that a panther exists. Now it gets a bit tricky. A panther has no way of recognizing that a superior intelligence exists. Yes, a panther does recognize in some instinctual sense that there are things out there to look out for, but it has no way of realizing that there are people who can engineer skyscrapers, or split atoms, or reconstruct the history of Rome. It simply is not in its purview. Humans can and do recognize, analyze, study, think about, reflect on these other forms of life. You don't need to say they are lower life forms or that we are superior to recognize this. We can understand all these things because in some sense, not all, our cognitive abilities are superior. But here's my point. Suppose you were to think, whether imperialistically or arrogantly or not, that we are talking about levels of existence from lower to higher, rocks, trees, non-human animals, and humans. The fact is that the lower ones can never know about the higher ones. What what they really are, what they are capable of, how they exist, what they do, and so on. They can't even conceptualize their existence. Then what in the blazes should make me think that I could possibly know if there was a higher order above me, superior to me in ways that I simply can't imagine? Not just one order above me, but lots of orders. If there are such orders, there is no way I could ever know. Literally, duh. So there's two things that are happening here. First, this proves the point that without God, there is no way to know truth. You can't even trust yourself. But Bart Ehrman here is saying that, hey, there might be a God, and so I have hope for this guy. There might be something above him, right, in his blog post here. So pray for him, because he would be a great defender of the faith if he came to the side of Christ. But he's right. There's no way as a human to know that God exists out of our own devices or by our own means. That's why God came down 2,000 years ago as a human. And if Jesus truly was the Son of God, and if he truly died and rose again, that means everything he said, everything he pointed to in the Old Testament is true. God has revealed himself to us, and that's how we know. And it is a great blessing, guys, and I hope that you realize this today. So last couple points here, closing this story out. Pilate realizes that there is no fault in Jesus. He can't find anything to criminalize Jesus, so he tries to let him go. He essentially says, hey, once a year we let out a prisoner from the Jewish nation. Do you want me to release Jesus? He's trying to appease them by saying, hey, you can condemn him, but we'll release him. No harm, no foul. Get this out of my hands. But the Jews want him dead so bad that they have another prisoner released by the name of Barabbas. This again happens today. People are so polarized in politics that they could care less what their party stands for so long as it's not the other party that's selected. This happens on both sides. In America, we've got conservatism and liberalism. Both sides do this. We hate the other side so much that we don't care how bad our person is. We just don't want it to be that person, right? Anybody but a Democrat, anybody but a Republican, we're going to vote for anybody but. And that's what's happening here to Jesus. These people hate him so much that they'll take anybody over him. And when you get to that point in your life, your philosophy, your worldview, it's probably wrong. At the end of the day, the person that we as Christians should put first is Jesus. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I want to be a Christianized American, not an Americanized Christian. Put Christ first in your life. That's where we need to be as followers of him. So that concludes today's Bible study. Next time we'll be reading about Jesus being sentenced to be crucified. So if you're interested in that, look forward to the next episode. And Christian friends, please continue to be the light to the world, be the salt to the earth, and go encourage somebody else today, because the world desperately needs it. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye now.